Growing up in a Hindu family, whenever the Ramayana came up, I always felt this quiet sadness for Sita. She did everything right, every duty, every sacrifice, yet what she got in return was loneliness and humiliation. Her story always felt unfair and incomplete. So when I found about the book, The Liberation of Sita by Volga, I knew I had to read it. The title itself felt like hope, like Sita finally getting her own voice, her own freedom. Some stories just need to be told differently. It felt like a rewriting of destiny, not to erase the old story, but to reimagine a more empowered and just ending. Welcome to our channel, Kanha or Kahania, where every story finds a voice. Before diving in, I want to clarify the liberation of Sita is not an attack on patriarchy or the Ramayana. It's a fictional retelling that gives voice to the women whose stories were often left untold. The book focuses on Sita's journey of self discovery and liberation after being abandoned by Ram. The narrative explores Sita's encounters with other women such as Supnaka, Ahilya, Renuka, and Urmila, highlighting their shared experience of patriarchy, womanhood, and their paths to empowerment. Let us move to our first story. The first story, titled The Reunion, goes back in time when Sita was living in Saint Valmiki's ashram with her two sons after being abandoned by his husband. When Love and Kush came back from forest one evening, their arms were full of strange, fragrant flowers. They told Sita about a hideous woman they had met in a new garden. The woman had no nose, no ears, but only holes in her face. They exclaimed in disgust. Sita flinched, as if blown away by those words. She knew at once who it must be. Supnakha. The next morning, guided by Love and Kush, Sita entered the forest. Supnakha turned, startled. She did not recognize Sita at first, but when Sita introduced herself with quiet dignity and told her how she ended up living here in ashram, she was stunned into silence. Supnakha told Sita how once she had been so proud of her beauty. She loved her nose most of all, calling it the perfect gift of creation. She decorated it with wildflowers, and almost everyone who met her adored it. But then the day came when Lakshman's blade cut away her nose and ears, and with them her pride, her dignity, her very self. She looked into water and saw not a face but a wound. Men turned away from her in disgust. She cursed Ram, cursed Lakshman, even cursed Sita. And worst of all, she cursed beauty itself. Her heart became a storm. She hated flowers, hated women who still carried grace, hated men who rejected her. She even thought of ending her life. By her own words, she was a walking volcano, a stormy sea of grief. Sita's eye brimmed with tears. She had never heard Supnakha's story told like this, not as a demon's humiliation, but as a woman's devastation. But then she told Sita that the forest did not abandon her. Slowly, it began to teach her. She saw a bird stripped of its feather, still daring to fly. She saw a twisted tree that bore sweet fruit. She watched the river carrying mud and flowers alike, yet flowing on in peace. And she began to wonder, was beauty only in perfection, or was it also in survival? Supnaka said, to come out of that spitfulness, to love beauty once again, to understand the essence of form and formlessness, I had to wage a huge battle against myself. My only collaborator in that battle was this infinite nature. It took her more than 10 years to find the answers. She struggled a lot to grasp that there is no difference between beauty and ugliness in nature. And in those years, it was her hands that have saved her. The same hands which were once clawed in anger now were forced to plant seeds. The same hands that longed to destroy now were trained to water, to nurture, to weave life back again into the earth. Slowly, those hands became tools for her healing, and from then, her garden was born. Every flower was her child, every fruit was the proof that her wounded hands could still create mesmerizing beauty. The woman who had once been shamed into silence had remade herself, not as Ravan's sister, not as Ram's rejected lover, not as a mutilated figure, but as a creator, a giver of beauty. Besides, she also found companionship in a man who loved her for her inner beauty. Supnakha's trial was no less than trial by fire that Sita had to go through, Sita thought, and it brought tears to her eyes. Sita looked around in awe. The blossoms swayed like living proof of Supnakha's rebirth. Her mutilated body had not defined her hands her creation was her healing. Let's move on to our next story, Music of the Earth. It goes back to the golden days when Sita married Ram, the prince who broke Shiva's bow and won Sita's heart. Sita's sisters were married to three brothers of Ram, and Ayodhya Mithila became one family. When celebrations faded into silence, Sita and Ram discovered each other in laughter, whispers, and playful quarrels. One night, Ram began recounting tales of demons he has slain on his journey, but Sita gently interrupted him. Didn't you see anything wondrous, Ram, apart from battles and killings? Ram smiled and spoke of a woman he had seen, a figure of haunting beauty, Ahilya, the wife of sage Gautam. He described Ahilya with her large eyes, her smile that carried both fire and ice, her grace, her discipline, which was in itself a beauty that felt so divine. Yet Vishwamitra had told Ram about Ahilya's story and how she has been cursed to become a stone. Sita listened the whole story with unease. The name Ahilya itself stayed with her for a very long time. Days later, when Sita visited Queen Kaushalya, the topic returned. A few guests compared Sita's beauty to Ahilya's, and afterward, Sita asked softly, "Who is Ahilya mother?" Kausalya explained, "Ahilya, wife of sage Gautam, who was famed for beauty and virtue, until one day when Indra deceived her in disguise. When the truth came out, Gautam cursed her into near lifeless state, shunned by society." As Sita listened, tears welled in her eyes. "Why such cruelty, mother? Why always we blame the women? Why call her characterless as we all are doing?" No one could answer Sita. Years later, in the forest, Sita found herself drawn to a waterfall, where she met a radiant woman. A stranger placed a hand on her shoulder, smiled with kindness, and said, "I am Ahilya." Sita's heart skipped a beat. At last, face to face with a woman whose name had haunted her. They sat together. Sita, full of sympathy, said, "You were wronged, accused of a crime you did not commit." But Ahilya's response startled her. "Does anyone know if I knew or not, whether it was my husband or Indra? Every person has their own truth, Sita, and society cares little for the truth. It only cares for purity, pollution, honor, and dishonor. I was not destroyed. I learned wisdom. That truth is not fixed, it changes." Sita was shaken. She argued, "There is only one truth that never changes for me, which is Ram's love and my love for him." Ahilya only smiled, blessed her, but warned, "Never agree for a trial, Sita. Do not bow to any authority." The words burned in Sita's memory. After Ravan was killed, Lakshman came to fetch her and informed Sita that Ram had demanded a test of chastity from Sita. Sita thought, was this not distrust? Was this not what Ahilya had warned her of? Yet, for Ram's sake, Sita agreed, believing she has to protect Ram from the weight of society's doubts. But later the wound lingered much deeper in Sita's heart. Even in Ayodhya, though Ram loved her, Sita felt the shadow of that trial always. She longed to see Ahilya again, the only woman who had spoken truth like no one else dared. This time, Sita collapsed into her lap, sobbing, and Ahilya comforted her. She gently asked, "Sita, what have you saved for yourself? You have given everything, your courage, your identity, for Ram, for others. But who are you, Sita? Beyond wife, beyond mother, who are you?" Her words pierced Sita's heart. Slowly, Sita began to realize her own strengths. She caressed her pregnant belly. Her eyes started glowing with a new light. She realized she was not just Ram's wife. She was the daughter of Earth, belonging not to one man, but to the whole universe. And later, when Ram asked her to return to Ayodhya, Sita smiled and refused, saying, "I'm the daughter of Earth. I belong to the whole world, and I lack nothing." Ram was left speechless by those words. Devoid of Sita's support, Ram tasted defeat for the first time in his life. By refusing to bow down to external authority, Sita had finally fully experienced the inner power of self authority. The third story, titled The Sandpot, brings us back to the time when Sita was raising her two sons in Valmiki's ashram. It was one of the mornings when sunlight danced on the river and the breeze carried the fragrance of wild flowers. Sita walked with Love and Kush along a narrow path where she saw a woman who was shaping wet clay with her hands. Her fingers were moving with quiet grace as soft earth was getting transformed into delicate pots. Sita followed her hands slowly. She can clearly see her hands had carried both love and sorrow. The woman lifted her face and smiled. "You must be Sita," she said gently. She introduced herself as Renuka. Sita remembered Renuka is the mother of Parsuram, who was known for her purity and devotion. Every day, she carried water in unbaked clay pots, held together only by her chastity. But one moment of human weakness, a passing thought as she saw the reflection of a celestial couple. This one moment was enough to condemn her. Her husband, in anger, declared her impure and ordered his sons to kill her. Obediently, Parsuram struck her down. Though she was later restored to life, Renuka's dignity was gone. Sita bowed, for she knew these stories where women were measured against impossible standard. And in Renuka's fate, she could glimpse her own. Renuka saw the questions in Sita's eyes and began to speak. Every morning, I shaped pots from the river sand. They were symbols of my chastity, fragile and unbroken. My husband trusted those pots more than he trusted me. But one day he imagined my thoughts had strayed. For that sin of his own mind, he ordered my son to strike me down. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried the pain of years. My own child raised the axe against me. I fell, but I lived. And from that day, I never went back to my husband's home. Instead, I turned to the earth. I chose to create Sita, to mold beauty from dust when men tried to erase me. Sita's chest tightened. She looked at tiny birds which were bright in the sun. And Sita said, "And yet, mother, you are smiling," she whispered. Renuka lifted her clay stained hands and said, "These hands saved me, Sita. They gave me a life when everything else was taken. Creation is devotion too." Then, with piercing tenderness, she asked, "But tell me, Janki, why must a woman's worth must be tied only to her husband or her sons? If they are taken away from you, who are you then? What will you shape with your own hands?" Sita answered in a soft, uncertain manner, "My sons, they will be my creation. My dharma is to be their mother." Renuka shook her head, almost sadly. "Children are not possessions, Sita. One day they will ask you questions that you cannot answer. Who are you beyond Ram, beyond motherhood? Have you kept anything for yourself, Sita?" The words cut deep. Sita fell silent, unable to reply. Lam and Kush were still playing with the little pots, their laughter filling the air, but between the two women hung a silence heavy as stone. That night, long after the boys had fallen asleep, Sita lay awake, turning the pots in her palms. Renuka's questions would not leave her. Renuka had told Sita to bring her children up like a pair of fawns without any attachment. Sita had no great ambitions for her son, but the thought of separation from her children wrenched her heart. And years later, when Love and Kush looked up at her and asked in their innocent voices, "Mother, who is our father? Where do we belong to?" It was Renuka's word that echoed back in Sita's heart. The next story is titled as The Liberated. When Sita returns to Ayodhya after 14 years in exile, she expected warmth and reunion. Everyone was there, but Urmila was missing. She learns that Urmila has withdrawn completely from everyone. Urmila never leaves her room. No one may enter except one servant who alone reports on her well-being. Sita was struck. 14 years of solitude. 14 years of silence between Urmila and those she loves. Sita wonders if Urmila even knew of their return. She insisted on going on to her, even when told Urmila will not see anyone. She remembers the forest, how she had always wished Urmila was there, walking with them, sharing simple joy. Sita begs Urmila to open the door. Urmila agrees and welcomes her into the room. Sita observed the maturity and dignity in Urmila's voice. There was calmness in her, born of solitude. She spoke of her silence not simply as anger or hurt, but as a journey of self-inquiry. Urmila said she had learned that anger itself is not enough, that silence can be more powerful than protest, that her value was not determined by what others expect of her as wife, sister, daughter-in-law, but by what she holds inside, which was her integrity, voice, and self-respect. She did not demand reconciliation in the way others were expecting. She does not ask for sympathy or pity. Her years of waiting were not waste, but purely self-growth, and solitude taught her to examine every knot of duty and every thread of relationship. For Sita, Urmila's journey becomes mirror and lesson. It shows what it means to be strong, not in public, but in private, to preserve one's self in silence, to choose solitude not as weakness, but as choice, to transform suffering into wisdom. Urmila told Sita, "Power is the root cause of all sorrow, Akka. Do you know another strange thing? We must acquire this power and then give it up. I shall not submit to anyone's power, Akka, nor will I bind anyone with my power. Then I will feel I have liberated myself, and I will feel only joy within myself, great peace, much love, and compassion for all." And when the time comes for Sita to face tests and expectations from everyone, she recalls Urmila's journey, those hidden years of silence and strength, which begins to feel that perhaps the greatest test is not of others' trust, but it is of one's own sense of self. Because Urmila, through pain and absence, preserved her integrity, and Sita decided to do the same. Urmila's word kept coming to her: assume authority, give up power, then you'll belong to yourself, then you'll be yourself. We all should remain ourselves. Urmila had repeated these words many times in different ways. Those words had stayed with Sita. She understood that she solely belongs to herself, above beauty, above all the roles imposed on her by the society. This way, Supnakha, Ahilya, Renuka, Urmila, each one had their own story. Each one had followed the path of their own. Her path, her way was hers alone. Sita realized that she had learned what she could from their experience. When Sita heard the sufferings of others, she realized that she was not alone. The awareness that she was one of them gave her strength. Later, when the time came for Love and Kush to be acknowledged by their father, Ram, Sita fulfilled her duty and gladly saw her sons accepted. She was also offered the chance to return to palace as a queen by providing her innocence in the court of Ayodhya. But she never felt the need. Something inside her had shifted. She was at last free. Mother Earth, her origin and refugee, was always there. So she surrendered to that place, returning not as queen, but as the daughter of the earth, owning her own truth, which was beyond any title. Meanwhile, in Ayodhya, Ram sat in utter darkness, closed in his palace chambers. Though it was clear that Sita was gone forever, Ram kept suffering silently in his heart. His entire life had been shaped by the duty of a prince, of a son, duty of a future king, and duty of protector of dharma. As those responsibilities tightened around him, he found that the very role he was prepared for became a prison. He was distanced even from those he loved. Lakshman no longer walked beside him, but instead bowed and held distance. The companionship of childhood was fading. Ram remembered his freedom during his exile in forest, where he used to walk hand in hand with Lakshman and Sita. It was that time when he experienced the joy of being loved simply without expectation. But those memories came with pain too, because now they were lost. He remembered the day when he was forced to demand a purity test from Sita, which he never wanted to. There were things forbidden by the rules of power and authority. Ram reflected also on his fatherhood, the exile, the separation from his wife. Ram admitted that although he carried titles and crowns, he had definitely lost something essential: the right to own his own emotions, the ability to grieve, and the ability to belong. In the end, the passage shows that for Ram, the real struggle had never been external, slaying demons, ruling kingdoms, but instead, it was internal, preserving love, preserving self under the weight of duty and expectations. His thoughts linger around his memory of Sita, which were the most precious days of his life. He knew Sita was gone and would never return, but by giving him his sons, Sita had cleared the way for his liberation. She had always stood by him, she had always protected him. In Ayodhya, everyone would swear upon Ram's protection. Who knew that Sita was Sri Ram's protective charm? So, who was Sita really? A victim of circumstances or a woman who claimed her own liberation? Maybe she was both. What do you think? Comment and tell us what you think about this story. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe our channel for more such stories from all across the world, because with every ear that listens, a tale lives on.